Hey everyone, thanks very much to our presenters. That was an amazing presentation. I really enjoyed that and saw some things in the chat. Thanks for sharing all the links, so many good resources there. I just posted in the chat for people to please share your takeaways. What are you taking away from this session? What are your aha moments? We'd love to reflect on that. And please put your questions in the Q&A. And I think I'm going to start off with a couple of questions. And I'm just curious, like for both of you, when did you kind of like hear about real-time data and kind of recognize the impact of it? Like when did you have your aha moment?
Jess, I'll let you go first. Okay, I'll go. Definitely for me, I was first introduced to Bindingless as part of my community work in Guelph, Wellington, when we were working with Built for Zero. And we had initially done a point in time count in the community, and it was the first time we did it. I think it was in 2015, and we shared the data. People were really excited about it. And then we had the and then what moment. We weren't really sure what to do with the pit count data, and it didn't really feel usable because it took us a while to analyze it. It felt a little bit outdated by the time we saw it, and weren't sure if like anything we did in response to it was actually working until we did another pit count like 2 years later, and that felt too long to wait. And so a binding list for us was really revolutionary and exciting. And it wasn't easy to develop. It was definitely a different way of working collaboratively. But once we had the data, it just sparked a new interest, not only from people in the sector who were excited to see the numbers changing and respond to interventions, but also from others that had been not engaged. So decision makers, politicians, media, who were much more engaged with the data because it was real time, it was responsive to changes in the community. And for me, just seeing the power of how it could shift the conversation and bring focus to such an important issue in the community was definitely my initial aha moment.
I think my aha moment, Randall, was similar with pit count. So I remember having pit count data or looking at it after supporting Windsor Essex in one of their pit counts a few years ago. And knowing that like, as you were getting ready to put it into the system, like you normally do, that some people were housed already. And it was that like lag between when you see something and you know what's actually going on in real time. And from there, it was just incredible to watch like a case conference happen and see people talking and strategizing together. That was something that I really enjoyed about real-time data.
Great. And just seeing in the chat there, the equity score tool is really great. Thanks. And again, I have asked everyone in the chat to share any aha moments, any takeaways from this presentation. We would love to lift those up. I am wondering what you would say is kind of where you see us going in the future with data in terms of, folks are starting to develop by name lists now. It's still not sort of universally happening, but if you kind of look into the future, what do you think are some of the next steps across the country?
Wow. Well, I think it's a really exciting time to be someone who loves data in this sector. It feels new and fresh, and sometimes there's challenges because we're learning all together at times. But as we see more and more communities developing by name lists, and we've seen like this groundswell of communities, particularly in Ontario, due to the provincial investment and seeing service managers have by name lists. It starts to happen faster as we have more resources directed toward it, and the more communities we have, the bigger of a picture we get on homelessness as well. I think that there will always be room for pit counts. I think as a snapshot of a national picture of homelessness, they can still be a really powerful tool. There's incredible research happening around connecting homeless data with administrative data as well to get a better understanding of that national count. But I'm really hopeful that as more communities develop by name lists, that will be the tool that we use to understand homelessness at a national level, and that we can see not only community interventions and how that is affecting the population in terms of inflow and outflow, but also how policy, provincial and national policy, can have real-time impacts on the sector as well. So I have lots of hopes for by name lists, and it's pretty amazing to see communities come together and start to develop them so quickly. It's been really inspiring.
I think my hope for where data goes from here, if that was the original question, Marie, trying to remember, I hope that where data goes from here is that it becomes much more equitable and people start playing with real-time data and looking at it from a lens of improvement. That would be my greatest hope, and that those improvements are taken and shared across not only communities within Canada, but just all over the world where we can keep sharing. I always say that teamwork makes the dream work. And I think with data, that's a great way to show it. And I think the more we dive into data equity and make it part of our conversations, I think the faster we'll get to our goals of ending homelessness.
That's great. I'm going to read out a question here, but I wonder if in the meantime, Jess, because you just sort of prompted me to think about sharing communities that have been really brave with their data and are transparently sharing what they have right now from the website, from the community progress, and throw that into the chat. That would be great. So we have a question here from Brenda, just starting on by name list and completed the pit count. Any suggestions or recommendations to a newbie by name list collector?
Yeah, Marino's one of my favorite quotes is like, use what you have, start where you can. Because that, I think it's overwhelming when you have that pit count data and there's like this pressure to turn it into by name list data really quickly before it becomes outdated. And so I know in my experience, we focused on specific data points and specific populations. So we started really trying to capture move-ins and focused our attention there, and then slowly moved out to being able to update the other data points in real time. But it was probably like first 6 months, we were just doing move-ins, and then 6 months later, we had incorporated families. So we moved on to another population. And so working at it, that strategy seemed to help keep the list still moving and in real time, without letting kind of the original data go too stale.
That's great.
I would totally add to what Randolyn said about starting with what you have and also trying not to collect like everything and anything. So one of my main principles with data collection that I know Randolyn and Marie agree with is like understand the purpose of what you're collecting, right? So never just collect something for the sake of having it. It should always have a purpose. And when you're just starting out, start with what you absolutely know you need and then build on from there.
Great, thanks. So we have a question here about thoughts on tracking hidden homelessness. How do you build that in?
Oh gosh, Marie, I feel like you would give an excellent answer to this as well. So feel free to pipe in. But Built for Zero Canada has introduced some really amazing tools to help people move toward what we consider a quality by name list. So kind of set a standard to ensure that the data we're looking at is at a certain quality. And one of those tools is a by name list scorecard, which does encourage communities to capture that hidden homelessness data and provides different, I think there's different policies or different practices that are available on the Built for Zero website as well. Lots of sharing going along with that community. But hidden homelessness will always be difficult to count. Like some of the limitations of a PIT count are also present in by name list counts as well, right? So one of the huge limitations of a PIT count would be hidden homelessness because it happens over a short period of time. It can sometimes be a bit difficult to think of strategies to connect with people. And some people don't want to be counted. And so they will be intentional about avoiding those situations as well. So those kind of limitations don't disappear with by name lists. The opportunity with a by name list is because it's real time. The people can be added at any point, right? And so you have more time to develop strategies to capture that population, more time to build relationships, understand where people might be. We're also encourage communities to identify who those folks might be who don't want to be added to the by name list and have a way to kind of monitor and keep track of them and continue to work on building the relationship. So they might change their mind and want to be added at a later point. So I think, there's more opportunity with a by name list to figure out the strategies for capturing folks, but we definitely encourage communities to do so. And that's part of the tools that we have. And yeah, Jess or Marie, I'm sure you have great thoughts too. If you wanted to add to that, that'd be great.
I would mention, and one of the parts that really helped me understand that section of the scorecard, Randallin, so thanks for mentioning it, is to not exclude people who are experiencing hidden homelessness. I know some communities, for collecting that data, they've used a series of questions when speaking to someone, like just in appointments and such. But I agree with all of the points that Randallin said. And I know, I'm pretty sure Marie would have more things as well if she wanted to add to them.
Well, I just think to your point, Jess, when we're thinking of by name list, we're not just talking shelters and unsheltered. We are talking, and it's about, I think you always say, Jess, it's about having clear definitions of homelessness. And in this case, we would certainly include folks who are hidden homeless and looking to connect with them at drop-ins or food banks, those opportunities to understand whether folks who are accessing those services are, don't have a permanent place to live, and just being aware of that. And I think asking those questions, and some communities have even started to reach out and they're asking those questions and supporting hospitals and corrections and whatnot to gather data in those spaces as well. So that kind of segued pretty nicely into a question. Someone asked, does CH provide support around data, and particularly around some of the data equity pieces you were talking about?
Yeah, so I'm always happy to chat with people about data. I put my email in the chat, and it's a pretty easy one to remember. It's just randallin@caeh.ca. We have lots of tools on the Built for Zero website that are available to folks about by name lists and coordinated access. And so I definitely recommend to go check out all of the resources. And it's a great place where people have shared as well. So you're able to see examples from other communities and connect with them. We've shared our resources in terms of the data equity gap score. That was from We All Count, the initiative by Heather Kraus. And so recommend checking out all those resources as well. But if you ever have, just want to chat about data, if you have a problem that you're looking for a thought partner on, I and my team are always happy to be part of that, and vice versa. We're really excited to learn about what you're doing in your community, what challenges you've had for us to think about as well. Yeah, we love that kind of dialogue. So really encourage people to reach out to us.
It's great, thanks. And I also just put in, if you're looking for just that quick, easy way to reach out, info@ch.ca, and then we'll get your questions to the right place. We have a question in here about trying to find funding for local research, but that, for me prompted a little bit, what is the difference between research and by name lists or data for improvement?
All right, well, let me first answer the question about where to find funding for research. definitely connect if you have a college or university in your community. There's such a huge emphasis on community engaged scholarship right now, and connecting kind of third and fourth or master's level students to research projects and opportunities. And there is lots of money in the world of academia. I don't know, academics might disagree with me, but compared to the nonprofit sector, you've got a little bit more going on there. And so if you can find connections with academics in your community, like that is often a great way to work on something and really partner between academics and nonprofits. And then I also think like having that really explicit motivation, part of that is being able to kind of sell the need for research in that area. Like if you can be really explicit with your motivation for doing the work, and you share that out with partners in the community, you can often be surprised about who might be interested in supporting it. It tends to be like the non-traditional organizations that maybe haven't connected with. They're not funders, but they have some extra resources that they're looking to invest. So I always like cast a wide net when sharing that explicit motivation out, and looking for funding sources. Also lots of funding coming through CMHC right now that is focused on innovative solutions, and it's often research based. So I encourage you to look on their website as well for funding. I don't know, Jess, if you can think of others to add to that.
I can speak to the other part of the question about,
sure.
There you go. What's the difference with research, real-time data, Bindingless Data, and improvement projects? So I may or may not have said that this is my jam multiple times, but this is my jam. So research, think about research as a longer project, right? It might be very academic in nature, could be taken over a long period of time. It's a study. When we think of real-time data, it's right now. So the purpose isn't to look at it 6 months or like a year from now. Perhaps you could use that to inform research, but using real-time data is how do we help people get housed right now? What does our community say right now? In terms of improvement projects, they're iterative in nature and should be short. So the goal is to continuously run them to then see in your real-time data what the results are right away. I think that all three forms are great for helping one another. Like if there were a cute little Venn diagram, it would be able to share information to have the best system you can. So I think there's definitely a place for all three.
That's great. Thank you. So we have a question here about recognizing that folks need to work together to collect bindingless data. And so any suggestions for how government organizations can work together with community agencies to collect bindingless data?
Yeah, I think in the majority of communities that Built for Zero is working with on bindingless data, many of them are led by the municipality. And so as a government organization, they're really plugged in. And so if your municipality isn't plugged in, yeah, maybe tap them on the shoulder and get them excited about this kind of work. But it is so critical, that relationship piece and engaging partners, not just in the homeless sector, not just in the government sector, but just like across your community, to have a really comprehensive binding list and ensure that it's really capturing everyone in your community experiencing homelessness. Just recognizing that particularly with hidden homelessness, I find that people are connecting with services, but they might not be the traditional housing services. So, you know, newcomers might be connecting with immigrant services in your community that might not traditionally be plugged into housing and homelessness sector. And so it's, again, important just to cast a wide net and engage partners. And I mean, your binding list is only going to be as good as like how comprehensive it is, and you need all of the partners you can get to be part of that, to have that really quality good binding list.
I would say to get the message across everywhere and to make it as great as it can be, it always goes back to the why. I always think of like our dear friend and colleague, Ashley, who always asks, what's our why? And I find it's really important to bring that back. So when people ask like, what's the purpose of a by name list, or why are we all collecting this data? It's because we want to end homelessness, right? So bringing that back, I find, is one of the most important things. I also find, as Marie mentioned, definitions are really important. Clarity on what you're asking and why you're asking it. Everyone wants to help, everyone wants to know, right? So having a simplistic way as well of messaging everything is really great to keep everyone on board. And if you're the municipality and you're wondering, how do I help, like our community or agencies within the community, I would say help learn what you can do to streamline, right? What work can you help organizations do to carry out, data collection? What conversations are you having? And just keep that communication open.
That's great. Yeah, I think, I think we've noticed as people get started, you start with sort of those agencies that are most often known to be serving folks experiencing homelessness, and work to expand out and keep improving that data over time. And I'm wondering if you can say something about, folks, even those who have gotten, and we do have now 27 communities that have gotten to a quality by name list. Is it ever sort of said and done for them?
Never. It's all about ongoing continuous improvement. So even when they get to that quality by name list threshold where we feel we've got some confidence in that their data is comprehensive and it's capturing people, and it's balancing every month, we're happy with it. It doesn't stop there. We encourage communities to continue engaging new partners in the process, to identify the gaps and areas that they need to keep working on, to make that list as comprehensive as possible. And so again, like the by name list scorecard, it has kind of basic questions and then it has advanced questions. And so even when you get all of your basics done, we keep challenging you to keep improving and move on to the advanced stuff too.
That's a great way to put it, Randall, and like that it's the basic version, right? So it's what you need to kind of get the bus moving. And something I always go back to again with the why is we're here to end homelessness, which is, as we know, a whole system transformation. So you might have those first providers on board that Marie mentioned, those who already are homelessness service providers. Then you're going to want other people on board. You're going to want to keep making it bigger. Like, what would our system look like if our hospitals were involved, if people weren't discharged into homelessness? What about corrections if people weren't discharged into homelessness? And having all of those conversations. And it also leads back to that it's for a community, right? It's all of our responsibility to end homelessness. And so how do we make sure that everyone is engaged in that process?
And we had a question like, what is a quality by name list? And I will just mention, I did put those two links that Rendell mentioned about the pages we have on by name lists and coordinated access. And one of them is a drop down on the scorecard, and it includes a guide that really explains a lot of that. But I would just turn it over to our presenters to share how you would describe a quality by name list.
I would love to. So for us, a quality by name list, it means that you have a 10 out of 10 on the basic scorecard. What the scorecard covers is some data collection elements, like making sure that you have certain dates, like move-in dates, when someone came on your by name list, all of that fun stuff. But then you have provider participation. So you want to make sure you have this 90% threshold of those in your community who are providing services to people experiencing homelessness. You want to make sure they're adding and updating your list. You have great outreach. That's another one. So it's not an in-reach thing, it's an outreach. You also want to make sure you have comprehensive population coverage with youth, adults, and families, and different locations so that you're not excluding people, which again ties into our hidden homelessness discussion. And I believe the last one is you want to make sure you have an inactive policy. So those are things that are with the scorecard. And then on our side, the data side, we want to make sure that you have 3 months of quality by name list data, and that it either balances or is within a 15% threshold of and that's just a margin of error, 15% threshold. Randolyn, would you add anything that I have missed?
Maybe just explain, Jess, what balanced data means and what data points they're submitting.
Yes, okay. So balanced data means that from 1 month to the next, your data balances from those who are entering your system to leaving your system. So everyone is accounted for. I can also post in the chat a link to our data reliability tool, which goes through all of those data points. Back at the beginning of the presentation, when I mentioned real-time data and inflow and outflow, we're talking about a specific set of data points that look at that. So how are people coming into your system and how are they leaving? The reason we want your data to be reliable is we want to make sure that we are accounting for people and that they're not being lost through whatever your data collection and storage methods are.
Great. And we have time for sort of one final question here. Any concerns that Bindingless may inadvertently create risk for folks with precarious immigration status? And I would maybe even add to that, you know, women who are fleeing domestic violence, like anything you would say about sort of what communities are doing to build in sort of safety for populations that are participating.
Yeah, I actually feel like, Marie, you might have better examples of what communities are doing. You're more connected in at the community level.
Yeah.
Would you mind speaking a couple?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I think certainly when folks are bringing in partners where there's those kinds of concerns, part of having a quality binding list is having a unique identifier. And so there is an opportunity to have folks participate where, you know, someone has the name. Someone always has to have the name, but names, we always get consent. Communities are always getting consent, only sharing that data with who it needs to be shared with in order to get folks housed. And then, you know, building in and working together with those community agencies or others to ensure that, you know, there are some of those considerations for by name lists and ways they can, you know, work to even sort of further the security of that data. And unique identifiers is one way that communities are doing that.
Yeah, I think another way too is just through the consent form itself. And so just being explicit and giving, empowering the person who's signing the consent form to control who can have access to their data. If you plan on sharing it with a set number of agencies, just allowing them to say if there's agencies they don't want their data shared with, is another way to make sure that you're just being really transparent about who you're sharing with and empowering the people, giving that consent to have control over their own data.
That's great. All right. Oh, it's so funny. Doesn't matter how much time is left for questions. It never feels like there's enough time. I feel like we could talk forever. And I really appreciate Jessica and Randall and your presentation. That was great. And everyone who participated in the session and all your great questions and comments. We are now moving into the last part of the day. There's a 15-minute break at 1:45. We will have the conference closing. And just want to remind you to complete the session evaluation that's located under the video player beside the discussion tab. And there are also, you know, games and social lounges in the next 15 minutes before you head into that closing plenary. So we hope that you enjoyed the session and you enjoyed the conference, and we hope to see you at the closing plenary. Bye, everyone.